I'm Andy, I'm 27, and I live in Bogota, Colombia. I actually have only been living here 5 months. Yeah, 5 months. Today actually is the fifth month. I grew up in Florida. Well, I guess I kind of grew up in Colombia a little bit too, up until I was like 11, but I don't have much recollection of that. So most of my life I lived in Florida, and then I decided this year that I was going to move here. Well, I we have discussed things with like my therapist and my doctor. He had me fill out a questionnaire to help him, I guess, categorize me. But as far as a diagnosis like that, I don't think I was given one to that point. But when I did go to therapy as a child, and a lot of the times when I did talk to my therapist, they didn't really talk to me like they do now as an adult. All that stuff that they normally would tell you, they would reserve it for my parents, and then they'd always bring them in or talk to them towards the end of the session. So I don't know if at that time they did diagnose me with something and maybe my parents knew and they didn't want to tell me. But according to what my therapist thinks and my doctor, it's likely that I have ADHD. I think that a lot of disabilities you can't really tell by looking at a person. Sometimes you think about a person with disabilities, maybe with somebody that's in a wheelchair, but they go far beyond that. And sometimes you can't tell just by looking at a person like, hey, maybe that person struggles with something about their health, their mental health, their physical health that we can't really tell by looking at them. So it's sometimes it's hard. Like I struggle not only with the ADHD, but I also have like a brain tumor, which is something that nobody can see. Nobody could really tell that I have a brain tumor if I didn't actually tell them. And for that reason, sometimes like I found that especially at work, when I tell people that and they look at me, they're like, well, you look perfectly healthy and normal. What is wrong with you? And it's hard sometimes for people to empathize with somebody that they can't visibly see their disability. And I feel like that needs to change. I lose track of time a lot. I get very distracted by things. So like my brain is thinking about a thousand things at the same time for the kind of work that I do, because I focus on providing customers a service when it comes to like technology and stuff like that. I have to remain very focused, and sometimes it's difficult, especially because I talk to several people at the same time, and that's challenging in my everyday life. It's challenging to sometimes be, you have to do something or get somewhere, but then there's like a thousand things that are running through your brain that you have to do before you leave the house. Sometimes also like childhood experiences that maybe have shaped my personality, but I have difficulty with like relationships, maybe sometimes even just opening up to a person to like a very personal level. That's incredibly difficult for me. I don't do that with a whole bunch of people. And even with the ones that I do, like sometimes it's even hard to establish that or communicate things that are deeply personal, because I kind of try to stay away from feelings. I think perhaps about my life, maybe changed the fact that my parents got divorced, especially when I was really, really young, because I didn't grow up with the nuclear family. And I think maybe I didn't realize growing up, but as an adult, I can see how that affected me, my behavior, and just my life in general. And I think that maybe if I had the privilege of growing up with a normal nuclear family, maybe it would have been better for me, but who knows? If your parents don't really love each other, why should they stay together? Maybe it would have been a more toxic environment. School was a problem for me ever since I was in kindergarten. I was the kid that used to always get transferred from one class to another because my teachers would say things like, "Oh, he's too far advanced for this class. We need to put him in a different class," or "Oh, he has behavior problems. He won't let us teach the class. He thinks that he knows everything, and all the kids need to learn, and we need to put him in a different class." So that happened to me several times in elementary school. It happened to me in middle school. Like I said, I was born in Colombia and I went to America. I think I was in fifth or sixth grade. But because the school schedule is different here, like here they start school in January as opposed to like August, then I had to like repeat half a year sort of. I went to private school here in Colombia, which is very different from public school. In elementary school, I would always like to play. I didn't, recess was never over for me. Like I just wanted to keep on playing. So I would come back to class late. And in private school, that was like a really big no-no because you're supposed to be monitoring yourself. That's what they teach you and stuff like that. So it's not like a teacher was like, hey, races is over. You had to know when you had to come back and stuff like that. But that wasn't me. I didn't really stick to rules, problems with authority. When I went to public school here in America, they thought that because I was Hispanic, they needed to put me in like the lowest classes, like remedial classes for kids that weren't really, I guess, advanced. And because they were looking at things that I had seen already in like second and third grade, I had no interest in things like that. So I would do like other things like talk, or if maybe it wasn't like easier to talk, I would like pass notes or like draw like a cartoon of the teacher to make fun of them or something like that. Or I would just pull out a book and read because I had no interest in what my teachers were saying because it was like, well, I already know what you're talking about. So like, what the heck? When I got to high school, because the dynamic was maybe a little bit different, you were able to pick your classes, and maybe I was able to pick more challenging classes that would keep me interested, where I actually had to study and do things that I didn't actually already know. It was a lot easier in high school, and like my grades reflected that because I had really, really good grades in high school. And if you looked at my grades before that, they were really bad. Also at home, I used to do things like, not listen, or I would just leave the house without asking for permission, without telling anybody. I was just always doing my own thing. So my grandmother at some point, her being like super, super Catholic, she thought maybe he has like a demon or something. So there was a point in my childhood years where my grandmother took me to this, I guess, a medium, you would call them, so that they could see if maybe there was something going on, or like a spirit was trying to mess with me. And of course, these people charged my grandmother some money to like pretend like they were exercising. Which, I mean, at that time I thought it was very silly, but as a kid, what do you do? I mean, your grandmother told you this is what you have to do, so I guess you just kind of do it, even though I thought it was silly. And like I would talk about it with like my sister, my siblings, and I would just joke about it. But I thought that that was a pretty unique experience that I had growing up. My mom's and my dad's side of the family are very different. So you have one side that's my mom's, that's very conservative Catholic, and they have their own ways of seeing the world. My dad's side of the family, they're a lot more liberal. They all, they're all educated. They all have college degrees. They think a different way. So their advice from that side was always like, he's grown up in a home without a mother. There's going to be some behavior issues. My aunt is a psychologist, so from them there was more of a logical way of looking at the problem, the behavior problems, and they advised. That's more of the reason that I went to therapy, was because there's ways of dealing with the issue that don't have to do with exercising demons out of a kid. I have learned empathy. I have learned to realize that people have challenges, and maybe not everybody's challenges are the same as other people. At the end of the day, everybody has struggles and everybody has something that they go through, that they deal with. So I think it's taught me some empathy, and to maybe have some consideration before you talk to anybody. Just think about, you never know what somebody might be going through. So try to be kind to everybody and just not not be mean. I'm not a healthcare provider, but I have friends who are. So I know that it's kind of like a rule of thumb to always take people seriously. However, personally, with my healthcare providers, I've felt, not from all of them, but from some of them, that they're just kind of there to see another patient, prescribe them another medication, and just move on to the next patient. So I feel like there's not a lot of emphasis put into like people's actual stories, like the whole picture. I feel like, especially in the American healthcare system, that there's a lot of just prescribing something to kind of put a band-aid over the issue, and there's not a whole lot of treating the condition. And it's very hard for me, especially, like, to connect and find a very good therapist. That's always been a challenge, because I may visit one, two, or three, and then it's like I don't really click with them. So there's not going to be like opening up. There's a lot of them that from the very first session have suggested medicine, and it's like, okay, I didn't really come here to get prescribed something. I came here to kind of like work through the problem. And I feel like there's not a lot of people who are willing to actually put in that work to actually treat the patient in a way where they'll teach them to deal with whatever is going on, that'll teach them about their life, and look at the big picture. Like I said, there's a mental aspect, a spiritual aspect, a health aspect, and all that. And I feel like there should be more emphasis in that as opposed to just treating people with drugs. I had a therapist one time tell me that homosexuality could be fixed, that we could work through it and change it because it was a mental thing. And I remember I was very young when that happened. I think I must have been like 15 or 16. And I was like, whoa, like what? I literally ran out of there. I had to ask the guy, I was like, listen, I'm not comfortable. Like, can I just leave? So that was a really ugly experience. Then I had, like I mentioned, I had other people that from the very first session that we had started suggesting drugs, prescription medicine. And I was like, I don't know if I want that. It just never really, that makes a person not want to go back to get help because they're not getting the help that they really need. In those instances, it never made me feel enticed to go back or actually try to work through anything because I just thought, they're just going to dope me up and shut you up because you're all doped. That it may be sometimes tricky to find, but there is people who are actually willing to help. Maybe even people who have similar experiences who can be there for you, give you advice, maybe talk through some things with you because they've had the same experiences. So I feel like that's a really solid way of finding community. As a matter of fact, I feel like in my life, I always find it that I make good friends and can really relate to people that have gone through maybe traumatic experiences. I feel like those are the best friends that I've had. And maybe people who can't relate to me in that way don't really end up becoming close friends with me.